Buster Murdaugh shares his Stephen Smith story, and will the words he uses shed any light on their relationship, and more importantly, what happened around the death of Stephen Smith? Let's find out in this video from Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And this, Buster Murdaugh, one of the most popular requests for me to look at. I don't know very much about this, actually, so that's good for me. It means I go in without any preconceptions and without any biases. Buster, I do know, is the son of Alex Murdaugh, who murdered Buster's mother and his brother Paul as well. Buster did an interview with Fox Nation, and mostly he spoke about his father and the death of his mother and brother, but he did spend some time in the interview talking about Stephen Smith. As I say, as we go forward, we'll look at the questions he's asked, the allegations that are put to him. Listen, I think a third of you are going to really hate what I have to say here, but do let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree. I think a third of people watching, I think you'll love what I have to say. Once again, let me know in the comments. I think a third of you, though, a third of you are the open-minded sorts who will watch, listen, and come to their own conclusions. Whatever you think about it, just let me know in the comments. Like the video as well if you get something from it, and feel free to share it with your friends as well. So let's go into the interview and see what Buster says. Let's assume he's telling the truth unless his words indicate otherwise. The first thing he's asked is his sister, that's Stephen Smith's sister, his sister said someone approached her and said that you and Stephen were romantically involved. His brother says that someone approached him and says that you were with a group of young men who beat him, that's Stephen that was beaten, beat him with a baseball bat. What do you say to those, both of those? Buster's reply is, absolutely baseless rumours. I unequivocally deny anything that you just read off that piece of paper. I did not have any personal intimate relations with Stephen, and that obviously cannot be proven because it is baseless. I never had anything to do with this murder, and I've never had anything to do with him on a physical level of any regard. So let's look at that again. And he starts off with stress. Absolutely indicates stress there. That's why he's stuttering. He's trying to get into his stride. He's maybe forming his words in his head, so he's not quite ready to say the word yet. So he says, absolutely. Now that is an indication only of stress, not necessarily a lie. Now, when we lie, we do tend to find that stressful, so we may stutter a lot when we lie. But here, we can't say anything right now apart from he's stressed, so that's why the absolutely comes in. I think he does directly answer the question. It's put to him he was romantically involved. It's put to him he had something or some involvement in the murder, and he says straight away, baseless rumours. I unequivocally deny anything you just read off that bit of paper. So he really does go direct to what is said. Or does he? He covers it off for sure. But he adds the words absolutely and unequivocally in. I have a hard time saying that word. I wish he hadn't said it. If you look at the sentence without those words, it would just be baseless rumours. I deny anything you just read off that piece of paper. When you add those two words in, it doesn't change the meaning of what he said. It's still a denial, but he's turned up the severity of how much he denies it. He doesn't just think they are baseless rumours. They are absolutely baseless rumours. He doesn't just deny it. He unequivocally denies it. And that's something that deceptive people sometimes do. I'm not saying this is deceptive right now. I think there's some reasons coming up for these words. But sometimes deceptive people add these needless words in to turn up the severity of what they're saying because they're not sure, because they're not telling the truth. They want to make it really strong in their words to make sure it's being believed. What next? Well, he denies anything that's on that piece of paper. So while he's not really taking on the exact crux of what was said, that there was a romantic relationship and he was part of this group, he's just denying anything that's on that bit of paper. Almost like the fact it's on that bit of paper means I'm going to deny it regardless of what it is. And only note as well, he's denying it. Saying I deny something is different, is slightly more distant than saying I didn't do anything. But in this first part of the answer, it's kind of direct, but there is a distance between what is put to him and what he says. Buster then goes on to say, I did not have any personal, intimate relations with Stephen, and that obviously cannot be proven because it is baseless. Got a repetition of baseless again. It came up in the first part of the answer. Just think to conversations you've had recently with your nearest and dearest, your loved ones, friends, family. When did you last use baseless in a conversation? It's not a common word, is it? Unless you're a lawyer. And Buster's dad, Alex, was a lawyer. In fact, I think he comes from a long line of lawyers. In fact, he may even have had some legal training himself. And I think this is why we've got some strange words being formed here in this answer. I think Buster's had legal advice before he did this interview. In fact, he'd be pretty dumb not to have some legal advice before doing this interview, because it's a very big and very serious thing. And if you've got lawyers in the family, if you come from a long line of lawyers, you'd get some legal advice. And so that's why I think we've got baseless in there twice. I think that's why he's talking about things that cannot be proven. And unequivocally, earlier, I think that's another very legal word. It'd be really surprising if he didn't have legal advice, and I think that explains some of the curious word choices in this answer. Also, baseless, by the way, subtly different from didn't happen. That means there's no basis for anyone to say that, which is very different in reality from that didn't happen. Now, he talks about personal, intimate relations with Stephen. A very curious form of wording again. Again, when you're talking to your friends and family, do you say, I had no romantic relations, or nothing happened between me and that person, or whatever it is? Those are things you'd be much more likely to say than the very strange personal, intimate relations. It's a very qualified way of saying it. You could have personal relations with someone that not intimate. The door's open for that there. You could have intimate relations with someone that weren't personal. The word choice again opens the door to that is there. Interesting. However, Buster calls him Stephen. He refers to him by his first name, which usually indicates some sort of closeness to that person there when we refer to them by their first name. It's a very close way of referring to them. It's not, he hasn't said, I did not have personal, intimate relationships with him or with that man or that boy, which would be more distant. It's the close form there, which is Stephen. So I'm not saying that means they were in a romantic relationship yet. I'm merely saying there's no sign of distance, no attempt to distance. Calling him Stephen, Buster calling him Stephen, only suggests that he doesn't have any dislike or disdain for him. Buster does use obviously in here. That obviously cannot be proven because it is baseless. Is it obvious? Is it obvious to you? It's not obvious to me. So why is Buster telling me that it is obvious? Is that because he wants to convince me that this is the case? He wants me to hear the word obvious and not look into it. I must be stupid if I look into something that's obvious. Why not just accept that something is obvious? Therefore, what comes next may be true. The word obvious, convincing words like that always need to be looked at closely. Cannot be proven because it is baseless. Obviously cannot be proven because it is baseless. Really? It's not obvious. We could look into that if we wanted, Buster, and we could look at that some more. Buster continues, I never had anything to do with this murder, and I've never had anything to do with him on a physical level of any regard. I notice this is in past tense, first of all. I never had anything to do with his murder. I've never had anything to do with him on a physical level. Now, the relationship, obviously, would be in the past. The murder is in the past. But, so that would make had all right, and it is all right, but actually, it's in the present. Whether you have anything to do with a murder or not is in the present. So I don't have anything to do with this murder would also be right. I'm interested in why these are both in the past tense. He talks about, again, the relationship in a really strange form of words. He says, I never had anything to do with him on a physical level of any regard. Again, not a phrase you would expect to hear in any form of conversation. Physical level of any regard. I mean, what does that mean? And note the allegation that was put to him at the very beginning was that he was romantically involved with Stephen. Now, Buster there, I think in talking about physical level of any regard, and also prior when he was talking about personal, intimate relations, he's taken it down to the sexual level rather than the romantic level, which was put to him. It was romantic, which is more about how you relate to someone, the feelings that you have for someone, how much how much you enjoy having them in their life and how much you enjoy making their life better. That was the romantic thing, but Buster keeps bringing it down to sex. Interested in why he does that. Bit of a distance here with I never had anything to do with his murder. We see that quite a lot from people saying I never had anything to do with it rather than I didn't do it. However, the allegation that is put to him is he was part of a group and it was the group that committed the murder. That's the allegation that was put to him. So maybe this is the right form of words to do with that. But normally, I never had anything to do with this. Sets the alarm bells going. What does that exactly mean? I never had anything to do with this. Why can't you just say, I did not do this? However, Buster talks about his murder. Normally, when guilty people are trying to be innocent and using words to try and show they're innocent, they'll give themselves away by downplaying what they did. So, for example, if you accuse a thief of stealing money, they'll downplay that stealing to, I didn't take it, or I didn't do it even. They won't mention the real hard severity of the crime that they're accused of doing. Here, Buster has no problems in calling it a murder. He could have said, I never had anything to do with this. I never had anything to do with his death. You're just downplaying it a bit. But he uses the worst word you can use when you're accused of murdering someone, which is murder. He really doesn't downplay what's happening. Compare that to how the strange wording he uses around the allegations of romance, the way he called them personal, intimate relations, personal, physical level of any regard. He's used some really strange words to distance himself from that. He doesn't use any wording there to distance himself from murders. You know, he could have said, I never had anything to do with his demise of any regard. Nah, he's really straightforward and he uses the big, most severe word for it. Let's look at that answer again. What else do I notice? I noticed that he didn't stutter when he said I at any point. I unequivocally deny I did not have any personal relations. I never had anything to do with his murder. A lot of time when people are nervous and lying, they stutter on the I before they drop a lie, because when you say I, it's the most personal thing you can say. You're taking ownership of something, and they get a bit nervous about the lie. Will it be believed? Am I going to say it right? So they'll go, I never had anything to do with this. And Buster, he doesn't do that once, and that is another indication that there is truth being told here. Just an indication, not proof, but just an indication. But the big thing for me is what was put to him were quite specific allegations. You and Stephen were romantically involved and that you were with a group of young men who beat him with a baseball bat. He doesn't specifically deal with any of those. Makes me think, again, he's had that legal advice and they've said, these are the things that you have to say. No matter what is put to you, these are the things to say. And I think that's why the answer he gives doesn't quite reflect the question that he's being asked. I know he doesn't say what his relationship with Stephen is or was. He always tells us what it wasn't, but he doesn't tell us what it was. We were just friends. We were good friends. We were casual friends. Didn't really know him or whatever it was. He doesn't tell us what the relationship was. He only tells us what the relationship wasn't. Right. That's that. Let's move on. The next question. Where were you the night that Stephen Smith was killed? Buster's reply is, the night Stephen was killed, I was at our Edistow beach house. He's asked, with your family? He says, with my mom and my brother. Now that is a very honest looking answer. It directly answers the question. In fact, it directly answers both questions. There's no words added in there that are needless. There's no words like obviously, or there's nothing there to persuade or convince us. It's a very, very straightforward question. Very, very straightforward answer to the question. Once again, he calls him Stephen. We've spoken about that before. It's reassuring to see him call Stephen. It doesn't show disdain, disgust, or anything for that guy. He talks about Stephen being killed as well. That's very similar to murder. You know, he could answer this question with, where were you the night that Stephen Smith was killed? I was at our Reddistow Beach house. Now, he directly answers the question by using words like Stephen and killed, which are in the question, and that might be why he says them. But he has no problem saying the words Stephen and saying the words killed. And that is reassuring to me there. He's then asked, what did you feel like when you heard that this thing was surfacing again? And he says, well, it's a lot like this. And you know, I don't want to be rude here, but have you ever been accused of murdering somebody? And the interviewer replies, no. Now, this is very different. Prior, he's directly answered the questions. There's been no indications of a lot of nervousness, but here he's evading. It's a lot like this. What does that mean? What is this? He doesn't say. He stutters. He goes, and I don't want to be rude here. And he evades. Instead of answering the question, he asks a question, which is just diversion tactics. Why is he doing this? Well, could be a couple of reasons. Number one, he might not want to talk about his feelings. He might be quite a buttoned down person, and that's why this stress comes with it. And I just really don't want to talk about my feelings. How do I get out of talking about my feelings? Or it could be that he's doing this to buy himself some thinking time. Prior, he's had the answers worked out. He knows where he was on the night of the killing. He knows he's going to deny the relationship and he's going to deny any part in the murder. But this, what did you feel like? I haven't prepared for this. I'm not ready for this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk a bit that doesn't mean anything. I still haven't thought of an answer. I'm going to ask a question to someone to buy myself a bit more thinking time. That is entirely what's possible here. He does stutter on the I there. I said earlier he didn't stutter on the I. He didn't seem to have any nervousness about putting himself towards some of the things he was saying. Here he does. He's a bit nervous about the rudeness of the question. So it's, I don't want to be rude here. So I think there's a little bit nervous. There's a little bit of nervousness there, but it shows he wasn't nervous about the other parts. And notice once more he uses the word murdering, the most severe way you can think of describing the allegations that have been put to him. He doesn't try and downplay them. He doesn't try and move them elsewhere. He takes on that word murder again and says murdering. But here he's evasive, and I think he does not want to talk about his feelings. So he says, well, let me tell you, this is very, 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 it's a terrible thing to place on somebody with absolutely no fact. So the repetition of very, what's going on there? I think this is buying more thinking time again. I don't think he knows what he's going to say. Her answer to the question of have you ever been accused of murder is one word, no. That doesn't buy a lot of thinking time. So, well, let me tell you, this just means nothing. That just means I'm going to say something. And then repetition of very 5 times, is it? Yeah, 5 times, I think, is buying thinking time. And he doesn't tell us what is very, because he stops and starts a new thought. It's a terrible thing to place on somebody with absolutely no fact. So all those veries suggest he still hasn't got an answer. And it really, instead of answering the question, which is about how he felt when all this came round, again, he just says, he puts some judgment out there. It's a terrible thing to place on somebody with absolutely no fact. Absolutely no fact. Again, lawyer speak. This is just not based in facts. But overall here, I think Buster just avoiding talking about his feelings. He then says, I mean, it's harmed my reputation. I mean, people perceive me as a murderer. This is a truism. if he's guilty of murder or if he's innocent of murder. If people perceive him as a murderer, it has harmed his reputation. However, potentially that would be the concern of an innocent person more than a guilty person, what it's done to their reputation. But once more, he's used the word murderer. So he's used killed once, and murderer, murdering. He's used that 3 times in a very, very short space of time. So I'm really reassured by the fact that he does that. So what's missing? I always like to look at what is missing in someone's words. What would we expect to hear, or what were we looking to see and they haven't mentioned? Well, I've mentioned one already. What his relationship with Stephen was like. He's told us in very strange wording what it wasn't, but he hasn't told us what the relationship he had with Stephen was. But what he hasn't told us also is anything unasked for. So many times in deception, when someone is guilty and wanting to throw us off the scent or wanting to make us believe that they are innocent, we will see someone add information in that they haven't been asked for to persuade us that they are guilty. It's that they are innocent, rather. It's just not, Buster was asked questions and he's directly answered the questions. He hasn't added more in. Here's a couple of examples from other people. So this one is from someone who has been charged with murder, but before that they were asked the question by a journalist, "You've been named by several people as responsible. Are you?" And the answer came back, "There's a lot of idiots, but there's no real truth in it. Honestly, I think I'm from a different walk of life. Joining the army for me was an eye-opener. I'd never experienced people like that." And you'll see there, "You've been named by several people as responsible. Are you?" Very simple, direct answer. Buster-like would have been, "No, I'm not responsible," or "No, I deny that." Instead, there's so many things introduced in this answer that haven't been asked for. The number of idiots there are, no real truth in it. I think I'm from a different walk of life. Joining the army was an eye-opener. I've never experienced people like that. 5 different subjects covered in one answer, but not directly. The question has not been directly referred to at all. Another example, this is a convicted murderer, and this was an interview that they gave before they were charged, and they were claiming to be innocent. "If they asked you to take a polygraph, would you not?" Now, Buster would be, "Yeah, I'll take a polygraph," or "No, I'm not getting involved in that." He would be very straight and direct if he stuck to the pattern of the words we saw there when he was talking about Stephen Smith and Stephen Smith's murder. The murderer here, in this example, he answers the question with something completely different. "I got nothing to hide. If they want me to, I don't care. I'm just at home, work up there all day. I barely go anywhere. Once in a while, I'll go into Manitowoc and come back. That's about it." So you can see there, they're asked if they take a polygraph or not. And instead of saying yes, no, maybe, they say something, and then we get their schedule for the day. In fact, their schedule for the week. We saw none of that in Buster whatsoever. So there's something that's missing for me. Okay, conclusions time. Now, this is a complex one. There are a good few markers of deception in the answers. Also, a good few markers of truth in Buster's answers. So the 2 things that were put to him: he had a romantic relationship with Stephen, and he was involved in Stephen's murder. In the round, he treats both of those things differently. He's much more straightforward about the murder. He takes it on. He talks about it. He talks about it in very, very straightforward terms. He's much more guarded and qualified about the relationship. So you want the questions answered, don't you? Okay, here we go. Was he romantically involved with Stephen Smith? I'd say that's possible. I would not rule that out. The way he's qualified about it, the way he talks around the house, he's a bit more about it. I think it's possible there's more to his relationship with Stephen Smith than he's admitted in this interview. Did Buster murder Stephen, or was he involved in the murder of Stephen? I don't believe so. He's very, very straightforward in that. Sometimes the words are a bit legal, but even when pushed, he uses words that say to me, not a lot to see here around that. But does he know some things about Stephen's death? Like what led to it or something like that? Yeah, I think that's possible. I think he may know a little bit more about it than he says, but I don't think he was directly involved in the killing of Stephen Smith at all. What do you think? Let me know in the comments down below. If there's anything you'd like me to look at or anything you want to get in touch about, go to connect.neveratruerword.com where you can find me on social media. If you want to read some more, posts.neveratruerword.com is a good place to go. If you want to look at some cases in depth, then why not try podcast.neveratruerword.com. O.J. Simpson and unsolved murder in West Cork in Ireland are the subject of the two big podcast series you'll find there. And why not watch some more videos on this channel at videos.neveratruerword.com.